Hello and welcome to Money News on Newsmax TV. I'm John Bachman. Joining us right now via Skype from Miami Beach is Michael Farkas. He is the CEO and founder of the Car Charging Group. He also has an extensive background as a successful investor in a variety of sectors of the economy. Michael, it's good to talk to you again.
Pleasure seeing you again.
Let's go ahead and move on and talk more about some electric cars and Tesla in particular, which is in somewhat of a tiff right now with the National Automobile Dealers Association. Tesla continues to expand its retail operations in stores and shopping malls and on the web, which kind of begs the question, do we really need car dealerships anymore?
That's a good question that we must ask the consumer. Are they happy with the car shopping experience that they have when they go into these large dealerships? I know from my own experiences, sometimes they're not the greatest experiences, going into these dealerships. I also know from my own experience going into a Tesla dealership and buying a car is a no-hassle experience. There's no pressure at all. It's done through a computer, through an iPad, through a computer screen at their locations. And I have to tell you, the experience is just a pleasure at the Tesla dealership.
You know, people can go into a mall, they can pick up a pair of shoes, maybe a new computer at the Apple store, then right next door is a Tesla store as well. And you talked about the experience a little bit, no hassle, no fuss. That's clearly working. Why has Tesla been able to capture so much success in the electric car industry, which obviously is very tough, when you have another company like Fiskars, on the other hand, which is seeming to fail in pretty dramatic fashion?
That's a very good question, and a lot of excuse me, and a lot of people ask that question. I am a Fisker driver, so I do have experience with the car, as well as I've driven a Tesla, and I've recently ordered one. Bottom line, it's about the product, and the Tesla is a phenomenal product based on tremendous technology, and really, the operations themselves were very different. Tesla is just a much better run company with a by far superior product.
Yeah, we've also seen, Nissan, Honda, of course, and Toyota try to get into the plug-in market, but they've gone about it in a much different way than Tesla has. Again, with Tesla seeming to kind of found a niche here, do you think that there are other brands that will start following in their footsteps in that mold?
I think that the core problems that all of the other car companies had was very, very simple. If we see any new technology, it's always adopted by those that can afford it, and it's typically on the higher end of the market. Like when we saw LCD panels, or computers, or any of these technologies, cell phones, it usually came from the top down. Auto companies coming there and trying to build a product. The Nissan is built off of the Versa, chassis. The Leaf is built off of the Cruise. Bottom line is, Tesla did it right. They went to the top end of the market where people could spend the money, where it cost a little bit more to get that product. And then you start seeing efficiencies where the lower end of the market could then, where things become commercialized, commoditized, and lower end of the market then starts participating. Tesla just did it with the right business model, whereby where the Volt and the Leaf didn't in their initial cars. Now that we're going to start to see a Cadillac version of the Volt, we see the BMW, we see still, again, a little bit more of a premium car. And then these products are going to be commercialized, commoditized, prices come down, and then we'll see them into the Chevys and the Kias and the Hyundais of the world. It was just following the proper, normal way that technology is introduced to the marketplace where Tesla really had an advantage. And again, also having just a phenomenal product.
So clearly important to approach it from a technology standpoint, not as necessarily a traditional automaker standpoint when you're just trying to sell the maximum amount of units. That's a fascinating way of looking at this. You mentioned some of those higher end brands like BMW. Also know this is happening in Volvo cars as well. Cars that may have normally taken higher octane gas are now running on regular unleaded. How big of a shift is this for the auto industry when some of these brands like BMW have cars now that run on cheaper gasoline? And what does this tell us about the whole situation right now versus in terms of gas versus electric vehicles?
Either way, gas is still way too expensive, and the cost to electricity for powering the car, it's just much cheaper to power your car using electricity to travel that same distance, driving those same miles. Whether you could use cheaper gas or more expensive gas, the bottom line is they're both expensive.
Now, do you think this is a reaction to some of the gains that have been made in the electric car industry? Do you think this is the, these combustion engines trying to position themselves perhaps to be more competitive as the electric car industry gets more competitive?
Yes, a lot of the technologies can adopt for internal combustion engine cars. But again, the bottom line is EVs are just much cheaper to power a car. They're much cleaner. When we now have the ability, utilizing solar and renewables, to have really from the well, as we call it, to the wheel, being completely clean. You'll never get there with internal combustion engines.
Well, I want to end on this question as well because, there's a lot of folks talking about this oil boom that we're having in this country right now with natural gas as well as oil tar sands, and there's increased pressure. It continues to mount on the president, on the White House, at least from the petroleum industry, to approve this Keystone XL pipeline project. If that does get approved, will you say, would we see any noticeable impact on the electric car industry and on gas prices as a whole?
I'll tell you, there are some benefits, and obviously we may have some cheaper gas prices, fuel at the pump, but we'll also have some natural gas prices coming down. That in turn reduces the cost of electricity, as almost all new plants being built in our country are using natural gas. So, if one comes down, the other one comes down, it's great. I have to tell you, the pipeline may be an issue. The tar sands are an issue. We have fracking issues. We don't know where we're going to go with those things. But if we take our time and invest in renewables like solar, like wind, and some other new technologies, we really can have green solutions in our personal transportation systems. And the good thing about using electric cars, it's really becoming agnostic as to the fuel source, because we have a transportation system, which is the grid. And whether it's coal, whether it's nuclear, whether it's natural gas, whatever it is, the bottom line is we could then convert those fuel sources into electricity and then put them over the grid and then distribute them so we can use EVs. EVs are probably the best solution long-term for our personal transportation system, because we truly become agnostic as to our fuel source.
Yeah, it's important to mention the fact that, especially in newer power plants, a lot of them are relying on natural gas to supply electricity to the power grid, which in turn is charging more cars. So there's a mutual benefit there as well. Not a lot of people think about it from that perspective, but it is important to note. Michael Farkas, CEO of the Car Charging Group. As always, it's fascinating to get your take on this industry and where it's headed from here. A pleasure talking with you again.
Thank you for having me.
A pleasure. And thank you for watching Newsmax TV.